Welcome, everyone, to Stepping Into Your Leadership. I'm your host, Christine Courtney. Our goal here is to give you some actionable takeaways that will help you lead your teams. Thanks for joining us on this leadership journey. Let's get started. Hello, everybody. Welcome to Stepping Into Your Leadership. I'm your host, Christine Courtney, and I'm thrilled today to have my friend in the studio who is going to be an amazing guest. His name is Vince Waduwani, and he is the founder of Econify, a software development firm renowned for building some of the fastest websites and applications for top media companies worldwide. Okay, so he's got a rich background, you guys. Get ready. Web development, mobile platforms, cloud engineering, data operations, and he's been instrumental personally in driving significant performance improvements for clients like Motor Trend, NBC Universal, all these little tiny companies that nobody's ever heard of, right? He's also an environmentalist and a proponent of fair play. Notably, and we're going to start with this, guys. Notably, he has contributed when he was at Apple to the development of Wi-Fi technology. Yeah. Wi-Fi didn't used to exist, youngins out there, and it does exist in large part because of Vince and his team. So let's start there, Vince, and tell us a little bit about what you did at Apple and what that means so that people out there get kind of a understanding more of you and of the kind of work you guys do.
Sure. Thank you for having me. So Apple was in a really interesting experience. I joined the company right after Steve Jobs came back. And during that time, it was a lot of upheaval. Teams were getting broken, re-put back together. And one of the big projects over there was the iMac. I didn't get there for the first iMac, but I led iMacs 2, 3, 4, and 5 from a combination of what happens on the software and the hardware. I was running the glue team in between those two. And then those went really well. And I got the opportunity to run a project that they called 42. And I was like very intrigued by that code name. And it turned out to be taking the 802.11b protocol and implementing it. So that is, for everybody that doesn't know, 802.11b is the first mass implementation of Wi-Fi. So we were the team that took all of those 250 plus configurations and put them into practice, breaking things into channels, getting DHCP working, and so on and so forth. So it was a really exciting time, and I'm really proud to have been part of that first release back in 1999.
That's so cool. And then from there, did you go on to build Econify, or did that happen later? Like, where was that?
I briefly got swept up in the dot-com bubble, and so I did a brief stint trying to found my own product company, which is very challenging. But after that, I pivoted and I founded Econify, and that has been my daily session since.
So tell us a little bit about what exactly Econify does, because sometimes when we use these words of cloud engineering and platforms, like what does that really look like to folks that are in business and listening? What does that mean in terms of what you guys provide?
Well, where you start isn't where you finish. And, where we started was doing some basic e-commerce work. And then over the years, we got some opportunities. And one of the first ones was with Bloomberg. And with that, we started our entry into understanding the very specifics about large enterprise companies and how they operate. And, we did really well. My team did really well in those engagements. And from there, we got an opportunity over at NBC, and then it just sort of snowballed on each other. And essentially what we do is we work with these large companies, media companies, and we act kind of like a Gordon Ramsay might in your restaurant. Like we end up putting together, the plan and teaching them like how things are going to work, and then uplifting their teams so that we leave them with an organization or a project that can stand on its own 2 feet and is really architected well, can stand up to the best organizations in the world. So we've done that several times throughout our lifespan here at Econify, and I'm really proud of how those things have turned out. Like it's given us a really great reputation, specifically in media, and we have really great relationships with all our clients.
So you're not Gordon Ramsay in the sense that you're going around yelling at them.
Oh, does he do that? I actually don't know. I've actually never watched
in Hell's Kitchen.
No, I've never actually watched the show. I'm too busy working. But no, essentially we're building these really big projects from platforms. So, we have been instrumental in Bloomberg.com as an example, and NBC, we were instrumental in building their current platform, which allows them to spin up new verticals. If they want to talk about something really timely, quickly, like let's say, a pandemic, for example, they can spin up an entire news division just to talk about that. We were instrumental for NBC in the 2022 elections with the big board. So we've done a lot of really interesting work. One of my favorites was the project over at Motor Trend, where we took a really slow and complicated website and we rebuilt the whole thing from scratch. And, we gave them a tremendous boost in both performance, SEO, and revenue. Like, we got a personal thank you from the CEO over there for the tremendous impact. I think it was like a 35% boost in revenue that we gave them. Which is pretty incredible.
That's cool. And if you're a Motor Trend, I would assume you would really want a website that's fast.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, things are changing now because of AI, as you can imagine. Google is, you used to Google something and the performance of your website was one of the factors that would go into how far up the list your product, your website was. And today Google is just giving people the answers now. So things are changing. Like, it's a really interesting landscape, and media is certainly in the middle of it, as they find, as do a lot of humans, they find where they have created content and they expect the value that they're creating to be realized by them. It is more and more being realized by AI bots who are taking that content and then surfacing them into other people who are just interested in the answer rather than who created it.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, how much do you guys incorporate AI in your work? And do you see that, like, I assume that, like everybody else, that's increasing, like, right? All the time. I mean, everybody tells me that they're trying this. I don't know if it's happening for real in businesses, but.
Well, there's a lot of apprehension in enterprise. Like, when we are looking at AI and how we would like to use it, we have different companies that have different policies. I won't go and name specific ones just
Sure.
because, but some companies that we work with don't allow it to be used at all, right? Like, so we have very specific controls where we are working on their hardware within their VPNs or in their offices, and you can't do it. Like, don't pull out your cell phone and take a shot of your screenshot. Don't go to the wrong website and enter something. And then we have others that are a little more liberal, and we can use tools like Copilot or ChatGPT. I personally have used Vercel's V0 to great success. We're actually partnering with Vercel at this point, but you can do some really amazing things. I built an entire website for a hobby of mine, just using the V0 product, which was really cool.
A hobby of yours?
Yeah. I'm allowed to have hobbies. I
We
mean, I
are
have a lot
such
of time to
different
use them.
people. I love that a hobby is to build a website.
I didn't even think that's where you were going, but yeah, like that's how I end up doing what I do for so long. It's been 24 years, not because I hate it, because I
No,
love
it's
it.
your love, right?
For sure.
That's probably more fun than actually running a company, right? That part of, like, getting in there and into the weeds of that. That's fun. So why did you wanted to try that new tool? I mean, I assume, you're using these words, but I don't know what they all mean. So when you said you built a website with
Vercel, V0. Vercel is a company. It's responsible for a technology that is great for building websites called Next.js. And they built a tool that makes it easier to use that technology. And essentially, you can just use it as you would prompt anything else in an AI chatbot. You could say, hey, and so the way you might start with Vercel is you could actually upload a screenshot of a website that you like and say, hey, build me something that looks like this, and it will do it. And then you can say, hey, when I fill up this form, when I enter my name over here, translate it to Spanish, and it will do it. You might say, like, when I click this link, open up a new window and give me these choices, and it will just do it. And so through doing all of those things and just prompting, and it took me about 60 to 70 prompts to get it all done, I was able to create a website that did exactly what I wanted to do. I shared it with some friends of mine, and when they looked at it, they said, wow, this is really cool. I Googled this company and I couldn't find anything about it. And I was like, that's just because I did it over the weekend, in my spare time, just for funsies. And that's kind of the way that AI is really impacting, software development is like, instead of taking a list of requirements from a product person, writing them down, and then, creating user stories, like a product person is now empowered to perhaps use a tool like V0 and then, say, I'm looking for something that does this, but it needs to also do this last 20%. It needs to be saved to a database. It needs to be scalable. It needs to be secure. It needs to have like all of those kind of like things that would wrap a ribbon around it to make it, production ready for consumers. But, the engineer can now take some of the guesswork out of it if a product person does it correctly and say, I see what you're trying to do. Let me get started on it. And it can cut a significant amount of time off of some product development.
Wow. Because you're doing that in a weekend.
Yeah, I can do that in a weekend. Yeah.
Wow. Okay. So, what are other ways? Because I think people are asking all the time, how do I, for instance, my son was just saying that he's in university and he went in there and he said, "Oh my God, this one teacher just talks. This one professor talks the entire time. And basically, he talks for an hour and a half straight. And then at the end of the semester, he's going to give us a test on that." Well, I'm like, "Dude, are you taking notes?" And he's like, "What?" Like, they don't even know how to take notes, right? So I'm like, you've got to get AI to help you with this, my friend. Like, you don't, and he who's young, he's 20, he grew up with these kinds of tools, is like, what do you mean? Like, how do I do this? So there's a lot of people, even young people in companies now, that are afraid to use AI tools to some degree because maybe their companies aren't specific or clear on what they are allowed to do or not allowed to do, right? So they don't want to get in trouble. But also it's changing so fast, they may not even know what's out there, right? What are some ways that you guys incorporate AI tools into kind of your workflow, or whether it's personally or at the office?
Well, let me talk a little bit about what your son can do, first of all, or how you
Okay.
can
Help him,
generally
please help him.
keep on top of it. So there are tools, right? There you have things like Firefly, you have things like Otter.AI, that will listen in on the lecture and then can summarize those things. So there are tools that are available that can help in that respect. One of the things that I was just recently introduced to and started using yesterday actually is ChatGPT, and not on the free version yet, but on like the middle layer, it's like $20 a month, I think. There's a new feature called Tasks. And that task thing can be like, hey, every morning, tell me I am a wonderful person in a creative way. And it will do that. But in my case, what I prompted it to say is like, I'm the CEO and founder of a software boutique engineering firm that works largely with media companies. Send me relevant news in the last 72 hours that is relevant to my job and industry trends. And this morning at 9 a.m., I got a list of things that I needed to know. And there's news that I did not realize happened, and it added value. And you can use that prompt to say, hey, I am really interested in how AI can improve my life every day at noon. Send me news and trends from around the world that is about AI that could be surfacing a tool that could improve my workflow as a HR employee, as a finance professional, or et cetera.
Wow.
So those kind of ways are great. To answer the second part of your
Wait,
question,
hold on just a second. That's on Tasks on
correct.
ChatGPT.
Correct. Like if you're
Yeah.
using the pro
Okay.
version,
I
like
have
at
that.
$20 a month, not the pro version, I can't remember what it's called. Plus, in the top right, you'll see an area for tasks, and you can set up a task
Premium
to
or
do that.
something.
Yeah, and there are other tools. Like there's another one that
Now,
I
Vince, hold on. Does it also tell you that you're a wonderful person?
Oh, thank you. It can, if you ask it to, it will. I think that's one of the things, like the things that it prompts you to tell you is like,
Well, as long as it can do both, I'm happy. So, okay, well, that's good because I have that version and I will try. I'm trying to, I've not been watching as much news as usual, but I'm worried that I'm missing things in my industry. So that's a great way to get around that. I love it. So you had a second idea.
Well, the second tool that I would look at, I think it's called Summate, but this one will take all your newsletters. So you can now subscribe to newsletters, and give you a specific email address. So sign up with its email address and subscribe to any YouTube videos that you want to watch. And it will summarize the YouTube transcripts, it'll summarize the newsletters, and it'll give you something that's very easily digestible. So you can keep track of a lot of information in a shorter period of time. So those are two great tools that you can use. So there was the other question that you asked, which is like, how are we using it? And there are other tools. Like I personally am a big fan of Notebook LLM from Google. I think it's a great tool. Like it allows you to just take the core of their LLM, their learning language. I can't remember what it stands for. Sorry.
Well, if you don't know, I don't know. So look it up, people. LLM.
But you can use this as a basic LLM and upload specific sources that you may want it to talk about. So, for example, for us, I've uploaded our employee handbook, and I can now ask it any question about our PTO policy, our paternity leave policy, dress codes, anything that might be covered in our employee handbook. It will actually tell me specifically for Econify what is the answer to that question. And I can now distribute that securely to my employees. And when my employees have a question, they don't necessarily need to first go to my HR person and say, hey, what is our policy around this? We can just go and they can ask the LLM directly. In the same way, like I can upload the resumes for every one of my employees. And now if I have a question about who might have a skill set that I need, I can just query the LLM instead of just maybe throwing it out in a Slack channel and say, hey, does anybody know how to use Terraform, for example, or some technology? I can just query the LLM directly. So there are a lot of really good uses that are specific for your company that Notebook LLM can be helpful for.
So, okay, so just go back to baby steps with me for a second. Because those are things, those are two examples that you gave are two examples that I know within my company we have to do all the time. God forbid when we have to find that employee handbook and search through the hundreds of pages for whatever every single time. It feels like such a task, right? So I love that. And your second example of employee resumes, we have to do the same thing all the time in a totally different way, but for like different projects of responding to a request for proposal, let's say from the government, and they need us to attach resumes of staff, we want to make sure that the resumes of staff that we have fit those projects, right? And so it would be so much easier if our grant writer could just go through and find that using that tool. So when you say upload those things, does that mean that what does that actually physically mean? You're just pulling them and copying and pasting? Or like, what is that?
No, that's a really interesting question. And I'd like to talk about copying and pasting a little bit more. But what you will do is just like you were uploading a photo to Facebook, you'll have a button that says upload source, and you will click that button and you will provide a source. And it could be a PDF document. It could be a website link. There are a lot of choices out there. In my case, my handbook is in a PDF, and it will upload it directly to Google, to their cloud, and then it will process that, meaning it will quickly read, I do mean quickly, read all 100, 200, 300, 400 pages, and then it will know exactly what is in your handbook. And it's pretty remarkable. It's the closest I've seen to the Matrix of I need to learn Kung Fu, but just a step before that. So it's a great tool.
And because if you have Google, you have access to this.
That's correct. I would just say Google Notebook LLM, and it will come up with the link, or you can add it to your show notes. And it's free. It's free for now.
Wow. All right. We definitely are adding that to the show notes if anybody needs it. That's awesome. And is there any other, I know that some companies, like I said, that we work with want to get their employees, they talk that they're using AI because that's what everybody feels like, that their customers need to know that they're on the cutting edge of using AI tools. But what I find is there's a big gap is between that marketing and then what people are actually comfortable using and trying, right? And when we've asked folks to say what's in the way, a lot of them, one, it's clarity just of message, because like you said, I think it's interesting, for instance, the company that you talked about, not by name, but that you talked about where you said you're not allowed to use it at all. Do you see a trend that will change slightly over time? Or do you think that a company like that would just stick to no, even in the face of the world changing so quickly with AI?
Don't get me wrong, that company also now has spun up a very large organization within their walls to handle AI and ML. So when they do implement it, it will be on their terms. And that I think is really important. Like the current choices we have now are to do things on the cloud and give your data to one of the big providers of an AI tool, Google as an example. I know we talked briefly about DeepSeek at one point. That is also an example. ChatGPT, one of the popular examples. But that doesn't mean that's the way it has to be. People have the ability to run their own models locally and gain some of these benefits without giving up their security. And I think that is what's going to happen for some of these organizations. Outside of that, I think that we are going to see a trend to behind the scenes use AI quite a bit. Right now, I see AI being pushed in some ways where it's 5% better than the old way of doing things, but perhaps 500% more expensive. I imagine that will start to cross, and you'll see things that are 50% better and maybe 100% more expensive, and then it'll cross an important chasm at some point.
Yeah. Do you think it's just one of those things where we just have to try to keep up with it? Try new things on your own at home, ask at work, keep pushing the envelope. Can I use these tools, or are there different ways we can use AI? How does the regular person in business today keep making sure that they're using these as tools, not necessarily getting replaced by them, but keeping up to speed on this? How important do you see that? Because you're little more in the future than businesses like mine.
I think people need to be very concerned about them in the same way that they were when personal computers came on the scene. They arrived and there were people who knew how to use a personal computer to create a document, and there were people who just wanted to use a typewriter to do it. And we see how that turned out. Like there are no typewriters in offices, very few of them today. Most of the stuff is done on a computer. And like this is going to be the way of the future in a lot of ways. Like AI is here and it is supposed to make our lives more productive. I think that there are a lot of things that need to be done to both protect people, provide training to people, and allow those people opportunities because, it's going to be silly to think that there are not going to be job redundancies. But, without those people who no longer have jobs, for those people to find work, like we need to make sure that there's some intervention by the government to make sure that monopolies can't continue to exist, for example, and that opportunities to start a new company are still vibrant in this country, as another example.
And when you say training for people, what kinds of training are you talking about?
Well, one of the things that didn't exist 2 years ago that exists today are companies whose job it is specifically to come into your organization and evaluate it and teach you how your employees can better use AI to do their jobs. And maybe they'll introduce you to some of the tools I talked about today. Maybe they will implement some sort of guardrails for you so that your employees can safely do the things they want to do. It depends on the size of your organization. It's going to be different for an enterprise than it is for a small to medium-sized company. So that's part of it. I forgot the rest of your question.
That's okay. That was a good one. Okay. And because I only have you for a few more minutes, and you have worked with and at amazing companies that have been on the forefront of this kinds of technology, starting back with your time at Apple. Do you have any good leadership stories or stories about somebody who was either a terrible leader or you don't even have to say their names, or a great leader, but like some story of that for you?
Yes, I actually think that I'm very lucky because my first two bosses were really good. And one was at my first job out of college where I was working on designing large bore turbochargers. And that boss was really great. He was more interested in my output than my presence. So, he would tell me constantly that if I got my job done, he didn't really care how long I was sitting in front of my computer or whether I was there from 7 to 5 or from 9 to 3, like he was just about getting my work done. And my second boss at Apple, I mean, wow, what an experience that was. I was really driven at that time. As you know, I was doing quite a lot of work between iMac and 802.11 and just too busy to even go to the gym orientation. And she got so upset that she blocked off an entire day and had one of my coworkers take me to an amusement park to ride roller coaster rides to just drive home the point that it was, again, about the work I did and not the amount of time that I was spending doing it. So I really appreciated those two lessons. And I think this ties a little bit back into AI because what I'm hoping we do is we end up in a situation where, okay, yes, we're more productive, but we can do more with that time. And some people will, but we can also have some of that time back. And I hope that at this point, we find the right balance so that we can actually have some of that time back for our families and our friends and our hobbies and the things that we care about.
Traveling.
Sure.
So that you can stay home and create websites.
Whatever floats your boat.
Using AI. I love it. Wow, the amusement park leadership. I love that.
I do too.
How'd you feel when you were there?
I was just beside myself that Apple was paying for that trip. It's a tremendous company. It's got a great culture. And, I'm been running my company with that same sort of attitude as well. And I think that it's really nice when you have a really good boss. It's great advice that I got. Don't pick your job, pick your boss. And I was really grateful to have both a great employer and a great boss.
I love that. Don't pick your job, pick your boss. So true. It's why people stay at places and why they leave, right? If it's not good. Is there anything, just a last little question for you, but is there anything that you think companies can do that we haven't shared? Like what if you're those people home listening or on their way to work listening and they happen to lead teams, but they're not so comfortable with this AI stuff, but yet they know out there that they need to get folks using it more in their organizations. Is there any advice that you have for them?
Well, there are two ways to look at this. Like one is, hey, I have to put some butter on this bread. And, I'm just going to slather AI on top of this kind of thing. And then the other way to look at it is, we need to prepare a better meal here. Like now that we have AI, like we don't have to just have bread on butter or butter on bread. We can do something a little more imaginative. And at Econify, we're focused on that second part. Like, hey, let's take the entirety of this this purpose of yours. Let us see what is now possible using AI. We're specifically doing that in the realm of software development at media companies largely, but what we are doing for those companies apply to any company that is doing software development. But it is an opportunity to kind of look at that and say, I don't just need to sprinkle AI like I would, pepper on a soup. I need to really think about like how fundamentally this can change my organization. That's what we're doing right now, is figuring that out for some of our clients.
That's so cool because it's so true. Like not just like here or there, stapling a new thing on, but like really having, either whether it's offsites or meetings or, where you're really looking at like, can we innovate here? And how do we think really outside the box? I mean, in some ways they need to pick people to partner with like you or someone that can do this kind of thing. Do you know what I mean? That can help them, because sometimes your brain can't even go there. You've already like blown my mind 3 times today with things that I have access to that I've never tried, So anyway, thank you so much, Vince, for joining us. All of this information will be in the show notes. And Tatiana did find out that LLM stands for large language model. So I think you were pretty close.
Perfect. Sorry for forgetting that. There goes my credibility.
No, you have too many other things in that brilliant mind of yours. Thanks for joining us today. We'll have you back another time to talk more about this stuff because it's just going to get bigger and bigger in our lives. And I appreciate you helping me and now helping my son. I'm going to make sure he listens too. It might make him listen to this. Thank you.
Sounds good. Take care.
Thanks everybody for listening. I'd like to give a special shout out to our podcast producer, Richard Francisco. Check out our notes for any details. And if you get anything out of this, please follow us. And if you enjoy it, please take a moment to rate us or write a comment. It will mean the world to us. We'd love to hear from you. And if you just can't get enough, follow me on TikTok and check out tlpnyc.com/podcast for more information.